Well, I want to thank everybody for jumping on here today. You got a little glimpse behind the scene there. We usually are in a green room when we get kicked off, but for some reason, Zoom webinar decided to throw us all in here together. So hopefully that wasn't too much behind the scenes coverage for everybody. But as always, I'm your host, Brett Rock, a sales manager here at SBS Cybersecurity. Really excited to have a conversation about today's topic, serving up stronger network testing options. Obviously, a little bit of a Thanksgiving theme here based off of the upcoming holiday. We did Halloween last month, so I decided to run it back a little bit here. Joined by two of my teammates, one returning. Lindsay Hull is on our marketing team. She's going to cover the marketing corner for us, talk a little bit about some of the great content we've got coming up this month, particularly some that really apply to today's topic as well. And then I also have Hunter Cockrell on the call with us here today. He's a newcomer to the Cyber Showcase, as you heard there. We had a bit of a conversation. He kept telling me he was on the Cyber Showcase before, but we realized that was Hacker Hour. I decided not to take that personally, but I'm very excited to have him here. Lindsay, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you make a quick introduction, and then we'll turn it over to Hunter. And I'd like for you to tell us who you are real quick, and then what is your favorite side dish for Thanksgiving? I'm going to put you on the spot there, so go ahead.
Hey, Brett. Happy to be back. I'm Lindsay Hull. I'm the content strategist here at SBS. And that's a really tough question. I'm going to go with green bean casserole.
Okay. All right. I can deal with that. Hunter, you want to introduce yourself?
How's it going? I'm Hunter Cockrell. I'm a senior network security engineer here at SBS. Been here for almost 10 years now. And I would say my favorite side dish would be probably stuffed mushrooms. I know that sounds weird, but someone in my family makes them and they're to die for.
Okay. Well, we'll talk. Maybe we'll get the recipe posted up here at some point. I guess I would have to pick. I'm gonna go stuffing. I know that's a kind of the answer everybody gives or most people give, but I guess that's where my head goes. So very excited. Obviously, it's a great holiday. Hopefully everybody's getting prepped for that and fired up. I'm trying to keep my kids from getting ready for Christmas. That's been my biggest challenge so far. But with that said, let's talk about the agenda a little bit. As always, you've got our very flattering photos there on the left-hand side, as well as our contact information. So as we're going through things today, if you want to follow up, have a conversation with us about anything in terms of the content here today, or any marketing stuff or any sales stuff, we're all happy to help. Again, little housekeeping. I probably should have gotten to this a moment ago, but if you have any questions, go ahead and use the question box that is provided. We'll be happy to answer those at the end of today's conversation. And if we, for some reason, don't get to them, I promise we will follow up afterward. Also, we do have a quick survey for you to take when this is completed. Really appreciate if you take a look at that. It helps us as we continue to make this a better webinar going forward. Also, one of the questions is, would you like a copy of the slide deck and the recording? And if you do answer yes there, I'll be happy to follow up with that information as well. From an agenda perspective, we're going to start with introductions and agenda. As always, we're moving through that as we speak. I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay for the marketing corner, cover some of that great content, as I mentioned. And then Hunter and I are going to jump into our conversation today. We're going to focus mainly in kind of three key areas: trends in network security testing, so kind of what Hunter's seen in the last probably 6 months to a year here. We have a couple of new testing options that we want to discuss that SBS has rolled out recently that we're pretty excited about. Hunter's been extremely instrumental in that Purple Team testing, so that one in particular I think is going to be a great conversation. And then we're going to jump into kind of a conversation about what network security testing might look like in 2026. So a little bit of what is the future of network security testing? If we have time, we'll wrap up with some takeaways and some Q&A. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into things. For those of you who are not familiar with us, certainly we appreciate you jumping on. Any current customers that know us, again, always appreciate working with you. We have been in the industry for over 20 years now, SBS Cybersecurity. We've got employees throughout the country. We do all kinds of educational opportunities, including the webinar here today, the Cyber Showcase, and the Hacker Hour, as well as institute certifications and things like that. And then one of the things we're extremely proud of is down there at the bottom. We were ranked #1 for cybersecurity consulting by G2 earlier this year. That's a review website, so all of our great customers that have provided reviews of us got us to that #1 ranking, and that is something we're extremely proud of as well. So with that said, Lindsay, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to click through. I know you don't have access to that, but why don't you talk a little bit about what we've got coming up here?
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Before I jump in, I think you may need to reshare the slides. I'm not seeing them on my end.
What's that?
I'm not seeing your screen share.
Oh. Well, let's try it one more time then. There we go. Is that working better?
Yes, looks great.
All right. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. All right. You think this was my first time at this? I promise it's not. But why don't you go ahead and cover it now?
Of course, yeah. As we head into excuse me, today's discussion on network security testing, I wanted to share a few resources from SBS that can help you strengthen your security posture. So first up, we have some blogs with some great insights. So the network security services you should prioritize, it really walks through those key assessments and audits that you can focus on to keep your organization protected in the next quarter and beyond. And then up next, we have purple teaming versus pen testing, choosing the right fit. This blog really breaks down when each of these testing methods make sense and how they can also work together. And then for our last blog, we have how a cloud security assessment helps to uncover hidden risks. And this one highlights how assessments can reveal risks in your cloud environment and that might otherwise go unnoticed. So those are some really helpful blogs that can help you get started and would be great to read after this session. We also have a case study from a community bank that enlisted our red team testing after expanding their branches and staff. And our testing uncovered some social engineering gaps that led them to improve their training, tighten their incident response protocols, and make red teaming a more regular practice. So that's a really great success story to check out. And then we also have a download. It's the CEO's Cybersecurity Glossary. This helps translate and explain the jargon that you see in reports and audits, as well as conversations with your team and your board. And it's really perfect for keeping everyone on the same page, speaking the same language about cybersecurity. So all of these resources are designed to make it easier to keep up with the new attack vectors that we're seeing, and they tie directly into the conversation that Brett and Hunter will go into today.
Great. I'm going to hijack it for just a second and mention that we have rolled out our newest track module. So we do have an employee access review module available now. We're running some webinars on that on a weekly basis, but if you're ever interested in taking a closer look at that, that module is built to help you get through all of that time-consuming and pretty labor-intensive employee access review. That's very important, but as I mentioned, is not necessarily the most fun thing you get to do on a regular basis. Module works great. We're very excited about it, and if you want to take a look at it, we do have some different options available, and feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to give you some availability there. But Lindsay, you want to wrap up by talking about some of our webinars we've got coming up?
Yeah, we have some great stuff coming up from an education perspective. So lots of opportunities to learn about what's going on in the industry. So first up, we have next week on November 18th, our resident Hacker Hour host, Nick Podorodsky, will be joined by Josh Dunlap from Results Technology. And they'll break down the security and compliance considerations around AI, biometrics, crypto, and IoT. And they'll talk about what that could mean for your day-to-day operations. And then next up on November 19th, we have Cesar Valdez from SBS presenting on best practices for today's network architectures. He'll cover the pros and cons of cloud computing, the ins and outs of a tech stack, and how to review your IT architecture. And then finally on December 17th, our Cody Delzer will take a look at the biggest cyber attacks of 2025 and what they can teach us, as well as practical ways that your organization can stay ahead as we approach the new year. So we encourage you to check these events out and register just to make sure you're up to date on all of our latest insights. And I'll pass it back to you, Brett, to kick off today's discussion.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Really appreciate you being here. And again, happy to get this slide deck to anybody that wants to sign up for some of those things. So with that said, Hunter, let's go ahead and jump into things. Obviously, as I mentioned, we kind of broke this up into 3 different components, and I want to really start with what you're kind of seeing from trends perspective in network security testing this year. So I think my first question, before we even get into kind of any specific trends that you're seeing or that you're hearing about in the industry, I think one thing that we hear a lot is what is good testing and what does good testing look like? And it feels like to me, the idea of what is good testing evolves and has evolved pretty considerably in the last few years. Is that something you would agree with, kind of the idea of all the different attack vectors that are out there, all the different stuff that's going on? Have you seen that kind of start to reshape the notion of what good testing actually looks like?
I would say yes, but honestly, it varies based off of the company that you're working with, if that makes sense. We review all types of reports, pen testing reports from various different companies. Whenever it comes down to the nitty gritty of it, it still can kind of be the same, where you have some that will consider a vulnerability assessment, if you will. They'll consider that to be a pen test. So there's still some confusion in that market, but I would say that the general verbiage and everything else is starting to pick up within the community as far as like pen testing goes.
And I think we'll have this conversation, obviously, as we go through today's webinar, but kind of maybe more of the idea of, is the same testing that we've done for the past, 5 or 6 years. SBS probably, you would agree, doesn't view like, we certainly want them to do internal vulnerability assessments, external pen tests, but maybe that's not necessarily going to stand up to the rigors of what we're seeing in today's environment. Is that fair?
Correct. And as we'll talk about later in the presentation, you'll start to notice how there's some new assessments that are being performed out there, whether it come to red team or purple team or internal blue teams and stuff like that. Getting more rigorous whenever it comes to the actual testing itself.
So let's go back to kind of the start here. What are you seeing in terms of network testing this year, and maybe even any new attacks or anything that's kind of caught your attention as you're doing this on a day-to-day basis, obviously?
Yeah, so I'm seeing a more emphasis in like internal testing. And then whenever it comes to, you also have segmentation testing and identity testing, cloud testing, as we'll talk about later. And then also device testing, seeing what exactly is out there. What recently got end of life this past October, Windows 10. So that being said, we're still seeing some of those devices on clients' networks, and sometimes the clients don't even know that they still have Windows 10 devices on their networks. So we're seeing all types of things whenever it comes to those, but I would say those are the 4 that stand out the most.
Can you break down, just for me as a lay person here, what do you mean by something like identity testing? What does that look like for somebody that's maybe doesn't know exactly what you're talking about there?
Clients that are just asking for a validation of like zero trust and segmentation controls, basically. Trying to see exactly what we're able to touch. Say we put a laptop on site somewhere, seeing if we can touch from point A to point B whenever they think internally that you shouldn't be able to see point B. So that's kind of the definition there.
And any specific attacks or anything that, and obviously we're coming toward the end of the year, everybody's going to have their top 10 lists of these different things, but any attacks that stood out to you in terms of, wow, that looks pretty dangerous, or something we need to really keep an eye on going forward?
I would say one of the huge things going forward, and I'll mention a little bit about this later, is the world of AI. You can't be on a podcast anywhere these days without hearing about it or going to a conference that they're not talking about it. It's making it that much easier to craft like ransomware simulations or ransomware in general, or scripts, macros, different things that make my life a little bit easier, I'll say. But on the hacker side, it's also making their life easier as well. So that being said, AI is very cool, but it's also scary at the same time. And we're only seeing the very beginning of it, even though it's been here a few years, but it's picking up rapidly for sure.
And I have a feeling that won't be the last time we talk about AI today, certainly, as you mentioned. So we'll definitely come back to that thought here. But changing gears a little bit, let's talk about kind of the landscape that's out there. Is there anything that that stands out to you that says, I guess maybe the better way to think about it is, what makes modern attacks, what puts us in a position where the standard types of testing that maybe in yesteryear really would have prevented or protected us or made us really aware of the threats that are out there and put us in a good position to defend against them. Things like, just our standard internal vulnerability assessments and maybe an external pen test. Is there anything particularly about modern attacks that are out there that kind of render those maybe not as useful as they used to be?
Yes, I would say so. It mainly, I think what it boils down to is, we used to, back whenever I was here 10 years ago, or even 8 to 5 years ago, our typical client that we were seeing was just doing, like an internal vulnerability assessment and an external penetration test. We're starting to see more of the clients wanting to get more involved in these additional services that we offer. And that being said, it's more about doing more essentially whenever it comes to your network as a whole.
Yeah. So, we talk a lot as a company about being proactive, right? And there's the kind of the compliance-based approach where, okay, we're told we have to do penetration testing and vulnerability assessment, so we're going to do those and, maybe some social engineering and check that box and kind of move on. But I imagine you would agree with the customers that we work with that are being proactive and maybe taking advantage of some of these other offerings that maybe go beyond checking that compliance box. Maybe it's not, that's not something they're doing just to be compliant. Those are the ones that are probably best prepared for what's coming. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say honestly, from from my side, it's a little bit refreshing to see these clients that are wanting to branch out and do these new services that we're offering. Because honestly, whenever it comes down to the purple team and the red team, those two are about as real as you can possibly get. And they show all the weaknesses and flaws that you don't actually, or that you get more of the consulting aspect, if you will, that you don't get with, hey, here's a report. You're actually identifying those vulnerabilities and then preventing them in live time. And then we're, testing them and doing them again to make sure they can't happen. So yeah, it's refreshing to see clients doing those for sure.
So, and I do want to make it clear, right? We're not saying you shouldn't be doing internal vulnerability assessments or penetration tests. Certainly, those are still valuable as a tool in a toolkit, but we kind of endorse more of a layered approach with that, kind of a, starting here. And then if we, we continue to get good results out of that and we're not finding a lot of vulnerabilities, maybe we do move on to the next thing and the next thing. Is that right?
There's for sure a roadmap, right? You can start with if you're starting from X to or A to Z, you start from your vulnerability assessment, right? Then your penetration test. And then if you are seeing things year over year over year and you're getting the same results, that might be around the time where you're like, maybe I should branch out into something else. And that's whenever we see those clients, they're like, and they usually make the comment, hey, we've been doing this for so many years. What you got that's new? So that's where we come in to offer that.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty exciting for us. You guys are obviously doing a lot of great work on new tools and new assessments and things like that, and to be able to have those conversations from my side, the sales side of it, where we're having conversations about what their maturity looks like, what they've done in the past, maybe what they want to look at in the future. I think your word there, refreshing, is a really good one in terms of just being able to say, okay, what does the roadmap look like going forward? You've done this test forever and it's always coming back clean. Is there still, you still need to do that from a compliance perspective, obviously, but what looks like, what's next basically. And I think that's exciting from both perspectives, hopefully. So is there anything you brought up AI, and again, I'm sure even this won't be the last time we talk about it, but is there anything that you see making attackers more sophisticated today than what you saw maybe even 5 or 10 years ago when you joined the company?
Yeah, so I mean, a huge thing right now is whenever we actually talked about this today, deepfakes. Deepfakes are basically whenever you go out there and there's all types of web platforms that are out there that you can do this through. But you can clone someone's voice, right? Like I could clone your voice acting like you. Calling one of your sales guys and saying, hey, I need you to do this, 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 and this right now. And then you are having them go to this portal and all this. Well, back, 2 years ago, it was me making those phone calls having to do that. Now I can click off 300 of those at the same time to an organization and we're good as gold. It's recording everything. And it's pretty scary the way that it's advanced, even over the past 8 months, whenever we're currently doing some research into this, if you will. Over the past 8 months, since GPTs have been evolving, it's been crazy to see how the AI is actually sounding more like that person. Or even just some random Joe Schmo that you can pick out of nowhere. It doesn't have to be a particular voice. But whenever it comes to that aspect, yeah, that becomes real interesting.
It's probably not unlike phishing emails, right? 5 years ago, a phishing email was the Prince of Nigeria needs your social security number. And now, I mean, phishing emails are almost, in a lot of cases, pretty impossible to determine that they are an attack, right? I mean, so, at the rate AI is changing and evolving, my guess is that's going to get there even faster in terms of realism.
Yeah, I would love to see. Well, I haven't done much research whenever it comes to the AI aspect of phishing, but I would love to see exactly where that's going to go. I'm sure that's going to take a turn here probably soon. So maybe we'll be able to roll something out with that too.
I also one thing that scares me about it is the accessibility, right? It's not like you have to be super technical to create a deepfake anymore. I think we did a cyber showcase a couple of months ago, and we had one of our consultants on it, and he paid like $10 and did a deepfake of me. And it wasn't great. It was probably worth $10, but at the same time, it's not like somebody's having to go in and create it themselves, right? There's a lot of availability for the, access to AI and things like that as well.
And like you said, back then it wasn't that great. Now it's probably killer because the new GPT came out like a few months ago. It's quite impressive how quick that's evolving. So it's impressive and it's scary at the same time.
Yeah. So greater access to better tools probably isn't going to make our lives considerably easier, but I do think we'll talk about it a little bit later on, as I mentioned. But I think there is an element of AI can be used for good as well. So hopefully we can kind of keep pace as much as possible.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of the other big elephant in the room. A lot of institutions, organizations moving their environments into the cloud from on-prem. And obviously, this is something that has also escalated pretty quickly in the last handful of years. From your perspective, and again, as an expert on this, what, if anything, makes a hybrid or a cloud infrastructure a greater network security risk than if I just have everything in-house?
Yeah, so you're basically setting yourself up, in the cloud, if you will, on a server somewhere in Washington or who knows where. You're sitting there, and your information could possibly be accessed from anywhere in the world. You could have open buckets somewhere. There's tons of security configurations that could be misconfigured. That's why we like to see that stuff kind of locked down, as I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit. But yeah, it's a scary world out there. How much can actually be exposed to the outside? Because back in the day, it was a server sitting on site. Someone either had to hack you manually, send a device in or come externally. But now those attacks don't really happen all that often. Everyone's attacking from the internet. So that's where it gets kind of scary.
And I think, to me, what's interesting is all of these, we're an M365 shop, for instance, and I know the cloud, the assessment we'll talk about isn't necessarily doing much with that, but the idea that all of these things that we're doing are built for collaboration and built to be open is great from one perspective, but also from our side of the house, in a lot of ways, it's obviously opens up a lot of risk, right?
Right. And all of it needs to be audited too, right? Same thing as, and the main part that is confusing for a lot of people is there's currently no governance on that right now. Everyone's just doing it proactively, essentially, which is nice to see. But from like the Fed standpoint, it'd be nice to also see some oversight into that and some recommendations and stuff outside what Microsoft is giving or Google or AWS.
So as a network security engineer and doing this work, what does the testing look like in the cloud environment? Is there really any limitations that we have? I mean, are the same stuff that we use when they are hosting it on site, is that still applicable if they're a cloud or a hybrid approach?
I would say it's different. There's definitely a different approach that you have to have with it. You can pen test it, you can audit it, you can do anything you want with it. And there's also just tons of information that's just sitting there possibly on a server somewhere that anyone can really access. And that, I guess, that falls underneath the pen testing realm too. But yeah, it's an interesting landscape for sure.
Yeah. And probably one that's evolving on our side as well. I mean,
Right.
we just rolled out this cloud security assessment we're going to talk about in a little bit. Are you seeing, maybe I'll rephrase this a little bit. What do you think from an adoption perspective for those types of tests? Are you seeing our clients that are moving to the cloud? Are they being proactive, or are they kind of waiting to see how it shakes out?
Based off of the amount of cloud security assessments and M365s we're selling, it does seem that they are being proactive about it, I would say. You do have a few of our clients who aren't really in the cloud yet, so they're not quite as mature whenever it comes to that. But you're also seeing our clients who aren't necessarily mature and also are mature that are getting these assessments done before the bad happens, if you will. They want to make sure that they have these controls in place to make sure that someone from the outside is not able to get inside, if you will.
And I know our M365 hardening assessment, which we've been doing for, I guess, a couple of years now, we tend to see a lot of pretty easy mistakes, like things that should be toggled on but are toggled off and things like that. Do you kind of see similar things on the kind of the cloud security assessment side?
Yeah, so basically, the way the things that you see is just improper misconfigurations. It's like Brett, like you just said, it's just a toggle and a switch, and that's about it. And that's all you have to do to remediate that finding. Now, granted, the cloud's ever evolving, right? So that toggle may be somewhere else one day, and then it's somewhere else the next day. Or they added some other security control that you might not be aware of because they're updating that quarterly, monthly, however it may be. It's an evolving landscape that is almost feels impossible to keep up with, but we definitely have ways to help with that.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about, I think you mentioned this earlier on, and I think this is a key point to make. For an institution or organization that does want to move the ball forward, obviously we're working on some pathways for people to take and things like that, but kind of what approach would you encourage? Is it more of a gradual, I'm starting here, I'm going to move to this thing, and then on and on and on? Or are you like hey, jump in the deep end, go for the red team testing kind of thing?
No, I wouldn't say necessarily jump into it unless your security posture is ready to be jumped into. We definitely have clients who have explored our red teams as their first assessment they've ever been with us. But we also have clients who have done red and purple teams who they're like, okay, well, we've done XYZ for you. We've done these vulnerability assessments. We've done these pen tests. What's next? What else do you have? So it can go either way, I guess. It just depends on the organization and how mature they are.
Yeah. So to that end, what would be a good indicator if you were talking to an institution and they said, okay, we just finished our annual internal vulnerability assessment, external pen tests, some social engineering. This is the third year in a row we haven't had a single finding or anything like that. How would they know, okay, maybe we are ready to take the next step? Are there any kind of indicators that you would say, okay, maybe you can move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I would say that some of the main ones are you seeing the same vulnerabilities every single year? Or it could go vice versa. Are you seeing no vulnerabilities? Like if you're doing an external pen test, are you seeing nothing every single year? Are you getting the same results, if you will? That would be a sign, I would say. Another sign would be, have you adopted any like new network technologies? For instance, like cloud MFA, a few others that are out there. Your incident response to your SOC wants to be better visible. Do you want to train them to be on the next path, if you will? Do you want to see the fruits of your labor, is what I should say.
Yeah.
And a few others that are out there, leadership, whenever it comes to like the executive level, they might not always understand, especially from like a price point, if you will, how, the EPTs and the IVAs and stuff like that, they're at this price point. Whenever you get into the red teams and the purple teams, they're almost in a little bit of a different ballpark, right? Because there's a lot more testing that goes into those. The other things, have you had any misses or internal incidents? Do they need to be tested right after, a year after an incident response or something like that? Those are some key takeaways there.
Yeah. So have you also hit on this a little bit earlier, which was good, but are we seeing any shift in, obviously there hasn't been a lot of governance that has come out around cloud or AI even, or anything like that so far. May change down the road, who knows? But have you seen anything from an examiner perspective from our customers? Are they getting tougher questions around, frequency of testing, scope, methodology, anything that you're hearing from, from people kind of secondhand from examiners?
Obviously, all examiners are not the same.
Right. Yep.
You could have an easy one. You could have one that comes in year over year, and you know the guy, and you take him out to dinner, and it is what it is.
Yep.
But I have heard some stories of examiners basically saying, what you should be doing more, and that can really revolve around the asset size of a bank, if you will. I remember about a year ago we did a purple team testing, and an examiner before that, and this is why they signed with us. I want to say their asset size was around, probably it was relatively low. It was like 250 to 500, I would say, in the millions. And the examiner was like, "You've done this year over year, and like I mentioned earlier, whenever it comes to the EPT, you're seeing these findings year over year. You need to be doing more and actually hit them with that."
Oh, wow.
And I've seen that I've heard of those stories a few other times, and that's why some people are starting to, get into the red team and purple team and stuff like that, and get used to the verbiage, possibly to work with us or someone else in the future, if you will. But yeah, it's there's definitely some interest there.
Yeah, I think it's just, and staying on top of that and staying, it says it right on the screen there. How do we mature our program? That's kind of there is the compliance testing. There are people that are going to always want to just say, okay, we've checked the boxes, we've done what we've been asked to do, which, it's hard to argue with that. That's what you're being told you need to do. But how do we go forward, and how do we, more real world readiness testing, right? And I think that as we get into, we're going to have a conversation about our new purple team offering here in a minute. But I imagine you are on board with the idea of that real world testing, real world readiness sort of testing is probably the one that's going to put them in the best position to be successful in preventing these attacks going forward, right?
Correct. Yes.
So, okay, so let's move on then. Let's talk about some of our new testing options. We're obviously very excited about a bunch of the different things we've been doing. Obviously, we offer our standard internal vulnerability assessments, penetration testing. We also have an engagement we've been offering for probably 10 years now, our comprehensive network security audit, that I've kind of always thought of as kind of a light red team, like maybe like a very, very early shade of pink testing team or test. But we're very excited to launch our purple team testing. We've been talking about this, I guess, for a couple of months now. And Hunter, I know you were very instrumental in kind of coming up with what this looks like and building this out. So just start here. What is a purple team test? What does it look like? And maybe how does it differ from, not only some of those kind of standard offerings we've talked about, but also the red team testing that we've been doing as well?
Yeah, so the purple team testing is basically, I'll come in, we'll have some pre-engagement calls and stuff like that to see exactly what you're wanting to test. We have our standard checklist, if you will, of what we're going through, what we're going to check, whether it be external, internal, trying to make sure that social engineering isn't get through in different realms and aspects. There's not much that we want to test. But the other part about it too is if there's any like additional testing that you would like tested, whether it be like testing your SOC for random notifications, which is included inside the standard purple team. But if there's anything you wanted to dig deeper into and try and like say if I was able to run like an LMNR or an IPv6 attack, we're going to try and prevent, or we're going to try and run those attacks, and you're going to try and see if you're preventing them. If you're not preventing those types of attacks, we're then going to come in and say, hey, you weren't successful in this, so let's try and remediate this attack. We're also checking, and we do that back and forth until the attack is no longer able to be performed. The other part about it too is like the logs and alerts section whenever it comes to the purple team. Say you're not catching my attacks in your SOC. Well, let's figure out why that's not happening, and let's keep doing it until we know that you're able to identify it and isolate those attacks from happening. I kind of explain it as it's a lot of hand holding, if you will, a lot of back and forth communication, whether it be on email, Teams, phone calls. It's a lot of labor going into a 1 to 2 week service, depending on how much you would like me to check. But it kind of completely falls in your court of what you want me to test. Like I said, we have our standard stuff that we check for, but it's just a matter of seeing what is out there, what's vulnerable on your network, and how we can help you make sure that won't be able to happen, possibly in real life or even on a red team assessment that you may have the follow-up year.
So, and I, again, jump in here if I'm wrong at all. So the Purple Team test is obviously, we are working kind of in collaboration, right? They know what's going on. We're doing these attack vectors. They're trying to prevent them. We're collaborating as that's happening. We're having conversations. If we are successful, we're going to work with them to fix it, and we're going to keep doing it until it does get fixed. A red team test, on the other hand, they're kind of in the dark, right? We're doing a lot of the same work potentially from a purple team test. And again, I could be wrong there, but a lot of the same attack vectors, but we're not working with them at all. Is that right?
Correct. Whenever it comes to the red team, basically only one person at the organization knows what's going on. Whenever the purple team testing is going on, the IT department basically knows what's going on. Red teaming is basically, it's all the way as quick as you can, and just trying to basically create a report in the end that tells a story. We're doing the same on the purple team side, but it's the collaboration effort between, I guess you could call it the organization's blue team and me being the red team, us working together in the end for a final product and result.
So I know on the red team testing in particular, there's relatively few guardrails, right? The institution or organization we're talking to can kind of tell us, these are the guardrails we want you to stay within, but we try to minimize those as much as we can to give them a real world test. Is the purple team similar in that way?
Yeah, like I said, it's whatever you want to make it to be. The guardrails are set up; they're predefined before, probably even before the contract's even signed. To be honest, we obviously have pre-scoping calls to make sure everyone's on the same page of what's going on and what's going to be delivered. But yes, there are definitely guardrails set in place for, honestly, any service that we perform.
Sure. Yeah,
as there should be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just know that we try to, if you're going to get a real world test and you're going to pay for a real world test, we want to have guardrails. We want to make sure we're not breaking anything, but we also want to give you as real world a test as we can possibly do it.
And I would say, sorry, Brett.
No, go ahead.
I would say, going back to the guardrail situation, it's honestly probably a good thing to have those guardrails, because if you're doing it during the purple team and I step outside of that guardrail, they're there on the spot being able to identify that. Maybe it was something you didn't know was a guardrail beforehand, and now you want it to be. And you have a way to address that now. So there's that aspect of the purple team too.
That's a great point. And I think that actually leads into my next question pretty well. So obviously, it's a much more collaborative process than probably any other service that we perform from a network security perspective. The purple team is. What's so valuable about that? And what are you hearing from the people that we're working with this on about why it's so valuable?
I'm not just hearing it from the client, but I'm also hearing it from the examiners too. They're all saying that it's kind of refreshing to see what it's like for an engineer to actually come in and give their guidance and show exactly what they're doing, right? Whenever it comes to a standard like internal pen test, all we're doing is doing the pen test, our standard pen test that we perform, give them the report and call it a day. There's no consulting piece after that. And that's kind of why I like the purple team. And that's exactly why our clients like it too, as well as the examiners that I've talked to as well. They've loved the collaboration effort of, hey, this happened, we addressed it this way. Can you tell me what happened over here? Yes, I can. Things like that. It's all about communication. I think the communication aspect is what the client and the examiner likes altogether.
Yeah. And it's just getting better in real time, right? It's not, okay, I've got my report and now I'm going to remediate it over the course of the next 6 months. It's we're doing this live, basically.
We're doing this now.
Yep.
Yes.
So how is improvement measured? What does that look like? Is it, how can we help them detect these faster? Is it containing things? Kind of and I imagine it's different for every engagement and probably every
Right.
customer, but what do you see as the most valuable kind of improvement measurement that we can provide?
I would say the most valuable one would be probably like logs and alerts. We have a couple of purple teams that I've worked on so far. They didn't have their logs and alerts set up with their SOC correctly. So whenever I was running these attacks and moving, logging into different things, whether it be in a standard user account, trying to go somewhere that I shouldn't be, they realized they weren't actually getting the logs and alerts for that, which can obviously be detrimental to an organization if someone was actually in there. So we're going in and actually finding those weaknesses that are there and helping them fix those and address those and make sure that they're being logged correctly. I would say that's the main one. And then also the other thing too is which is fun in the beginning, is your SOC performing correctly? We see that a lot where we have clients who, they think their SOC is top tier, or they're working with like a third party SOC, if you will, in the beginning of it. They tend to showboat a little bit about it, if you will, thinking that they are with a really good product. And I've had one where they actually ended up firing their SOC in the end of it and moving on to something else. So things like that become very valuable to a client whenever it comes to that.
All right, so forgive my ignorance on this. I hear SOC, and I think from a vendor management perspective, a SOC report. What are we talking about here?
I don't actually know the definition of a SOC.
Okay, but it is a tool, is what you're talking about.
Security Operations Center. So basically, I was just trying to find the actual definition of it. I just go by SOC. It's basically, sometimes you have them on site. Sometimes it's a third-party vendor that's, going over these logs and alerts and is telling you that they're doing their job whenever they might not be. And so it's basically just one honed down area of your IT department that is dedicated to security operations.
Perfect. So we're going to move on to the cloud security assessment in a second, but I want to finish up with this question. And I think you've already touched on it a little bit, but I want to get a good answer here, a firm answer. In your opinion, which one should come first? So let's say we've done the standard testing for a while. Maybe we've done a comprehensive network security audit for a few years. We're getting good results. We're not seeing a ton of benefit or value from those any longer. Do I go red team test or do I go purple team test first, or does it really matter?
In my professional opinion, I think, you should do your small assessments that we mentioned earlier to secure your posture. I do think that it should be purple team first and then red team.
Okay.
I think that we should come in and address the vulnerabilities and find everything that's wrong with you before you have an engagement like a red team operation happen. Everyone in this industry has their own opinions on that. From the people that I've talked to, even at the FDIC here in Richmond or the FIEC, they did talks on this too, and they also agree that purple team is the way to go first. You'll also find people here at this company that also say different. They think the red team should be first, but they're the ones that are doing the red team. So obviously they want to be able to get into everything first. But I do think that the way to go about it is to address your concerns beforehand to make sure that you're ready for the red team and then perform the red team.
I think I tend to agree with you. I'm kind of on the side of let's have the collaborative effort first. Let's work together. Let's make sure you're headed in the right direction, and then we get a real world, nobody knows what's happening kind of look at it as well. So,
and the cool part about it too is what I really like about it is the consulting piece. You get to build that relationship with the client too. If it's a new client, that can be, a gold mine right there, essentially. Building that relationship and them having an understanding of who we are and what we do as a company.
So let's talk about the cloud security assessment. A little bit less to talk about here because it's a pretty straightforward assessment, but can you kind of just high level maybe give us an idea of what the cloud security assessment is built to do?
Yep. So whenever it comes to the cloud security assessment, you can look at it this way. as Brett has mentioned, we have our M365 audit. We also have our Azure audit. We have an AWS and a GCP audit. We have found scanners and tools that are out there that will scan these AWS, GCP, Azure, even M365. These tools will scan for all of those checks that we mentioned earlier that, you have to go in there and manually configure all these things. It'll see and it'll pop up as a fail or a pass. If it's a fail, you have to go in there and check for it. And obviously, I would say it probably has a 90% accuracy rate whenever it comes to that. So we see a lot of benefit in there. Even whenever we're doing our M365s and AWS, Azure, GCP, whatever it may be, whenever we're doing those, we're also using these tools, but we're also going through and obviously manually verifying these. But I would look at it as a vulnerability assessment for your cloud, essentially.
So I imagine this would be a good fit for anybody who has moved to the cloud recently or made significant changes, that kind of thing.
I would say it's probably a good first step for sure. You've obviously paid someone or you had someone install whatever it may be, your cloud provider on your network. From there, you need to check for those controls. And like we mentioned earlier, whenever it comes to the ever-changing world of the cloud, they're changing quarterly or yearly, but more than likely monthly to quarterly. So you're having to constantly go in there, and it's hard to keep up with these things. If we at SBS have like a vulnerability scanner, if you will, that can check for all of those things on whatever basis you may want, we're definitely able to do that, and that's the nice part about doing that.
And to me, I think it just comes down to what we talked about previously as well, which is it's just it seems to me easy to make some mistakes in terms of configuration when it comes to the cloud, maybe easier than it was on some of the other different servers and things like that we've had in the past. Is that
right? I would say part of it boils down to a learning curve, possibly. The cloud's so new, not everyone's used to it. And I didn't learn much about the cloud whenever I was in college. So that being said, it's an ever-changing landscape out there. So having these services that we can perform that don't take all that long and are relatively easy to do for the organization and for us on whatever basis you may want makes it that much easier for everyone.
Yeah, kind of just gives them that peace of mind that everything's headed in the right direction currently, right. And as it continues to evolve, it's just a good spot check for.
Correct,
yeah. So again, two great options. We're really excited about both of them. I think the Purple Team testing in particular is going to be something that we've already done a few and continue to get people reaching out to us about. The Cloud Security Assessment is probably the newest service that we've created, but again, one that we think with the importance of cloud security in terms of how many people are moving things there, I think it's only going to kind of get busier for us on that side of the house as well. So excited about those and happy to talk to anybody that might want to learn more about them. So as we kind of start to wrap things up, we've got about, I guess, a little under 15 minutes left. So I'm actually doing pretty well time-wise. Let's kind of pivot to what the future looks like here, Hunter. So obviously, we've rolled out some newer services in the past year. We just talked about a couple of them. Red Team testing is something that we rolled out, I think, last year, and it's kind of continued to grow. What does the future, just broadly, what does the future look like to you in testing look like to you?
As scary as it sounds to me, I've been saying this for years, writing scripts and everything to help with my, jobs or my job and my code and everything. I've been using this phrase, automating yourself out of the job, insert whatever year it may be here. I would say AI being implemented into pen testing. And then also boiling down to like social engineering and all of that. That is a tremendous probably step forward in advance that we're going to see over the next few years. There's going to be a ton of products that are already out there. And also some things that we're starting to look into for our standard testing practices. AI is going to be the future whenever it comes to all of this, and it's going to make my job that much easier, but it's also going to make it that much more complex for everyone else. But you're going to have to if you're not using it, you're already 10 years behind, essentially, is what the phrase goes. So I would say AI is the huge hit there whenever it comes to all those.
So again, I'm going to go back a couple of months. I did a cyber showcase with one of our consultants, and we were talking about AI. And I kind of brought up the idea that, AI is moving so fast, it's going to be, it's going to improve by leaps and bounds, and we probably will never catch up to it. And I kind of was, I guess, a fatalistic point of view there. And the consultant on the webinar with me said, I think, the testing side, I think the good side of AI will probably, continue to improve alongside with it and stay pretty close. Are you kind of more of the glass half full or glass half empty in terms of AI getting out in front of the ability to test for it and things like that?
I'm glass half full. I'm completely for using it in any realm aspect that I can. I use it to write scripts all the time. I would love to find a way for us to use it internally for some of our attack methods. Obviously, there's some issues there with how it's being used throughout the landscape. But yeah, I'm for it.
Yeah, and you think that people, like you mentioned, some tools that are building AI into their processes, and we're looking at it for some of the things we do. Are you relatively confident that being able to use it to, maybe train and test and keep people kind of ahead of the nefarious uses for it, they're going to stay pretty close, or do you see one side kind of leapfrogging the other?
I don't know. We'll see how it advances, I suppose.
Right. It's probably a tough question to answer.
I could say no, but knock on wood, 2 years from now, I mean, it could, like I mentioned earlier, automate myself out of the job. But I don't see that happening by any means. I think everyone will be fine whenever it comes to the pen testing side, because you do need the human element to everything, regardless. So I'm like I said, I'm completely for it.
So what do you think about the idea of kind of, obviously right now we're running, any of those individual tests we talk about, internal vulnerability, penetration testing, social engineering, or even something like a Purple Team test. That's kind of a point in time measurement of where people are. Do you think that maybe frequency of testing is kind of, something that could be changing in the future? The idea of more of a continuous validation rather, being more valuable?
I would say yes. We have a lot of our clients who are doing, like, for instance, whenever you go to the lower tier of stuff like vulnerability assessments, we have a lot of our clients that contract us out to do monthly vulnerability assessments. We have a ton that do quarterly, and obviously we have a ton that do yearly too. But we start to see a lot more of our clients who are like, hey, we need, and this actually comes down to, I think, the examiner as well. They do recommend the more frequency of those, but like we said earlier, it depends on the examiner that you get that may recommend that. So that's ever changing as well. It'd be interesting to see if there was like a standard protocol for that answer, if you would.
Yeah,
But
right.
I haven't seen something as far as like pen testing goes. But whenever it comes down to the nitty gritty of it, there's automated pen testing that's out there right now, which is something that we're exploring and trying to find a way to get into. So I do see those types of services definitely picking up here in the near future. And since, AI is picking up too, maybe that can help us advance that. We'll have to see.
Yeah. And again, just the idea of, if I do something once a year versus I do it, once a month or once a week or even more frequently than that, obviously I'm putting myself in a better position to be successful.
Correct. Yes.
So you also touched on this a minute ago, and I probably should have gone to this question next. I apologize, but what do you see as the right balance between automation and testing and kind of that human element? I know you joke about working yourself out of a job by creating these scripts and things like that. I certainly don't see that happening. Obviously, I think you're extremely valuable here, but what do you see that balance looking like? Obviously, the automation can make our lives easier. It can make our jobs easier, maybe make the testing more effective and efficient, but we're probably always going to need some human element in there as well, right?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to the validation of the results. You have to have someone who is at least, somewhat educated to go through and be able to identify. We've had false positives for ever in eternity. You have to have someone that can go through and look at the results that these AIs or anything is giving out and be able to determine, oh, that wasn't actually what that was. You type into an AI and it can give you 20 different types of results for the same question, right?
Right.
So you can't always trust it. That's why there has to be the human element there to be able to verify that those results are in fact correct.
So I guess along that line, do you, we obviously talk a lot about people are always the weakest link in the chain when it comes to security. You may have all the technology in the world, you may do all the training in the world, you may be doing everything right, but if I can trick one person into, opening the door or a window, we have, a bad guy or us can get access to some things there. Do you think that ever changes or changes in the near future, that people being the weakest link in the chain?
So I honestly don't think that's ever going to change, because here's the main takeaway there. Think about whenever we were talking about configurations, whenever it comes to like your M365 or any of your cloud environments, who has to set that up?
Yeah,
a human. So that being said, someone had to do that. That human aspect or that human factor is always going to be there, because robots don't just build themselves, at least not yet. Whenever it comes to that. So, I definitely think for the time being, give it that, how many ever years, I still think that that's going to pose true.
Yeah. So I got two more questions for you, and then we'll see if anybody had any here. As organizations and institutions do continue to move more into the cloud or security as a service or adopting APIs, we just did a big webinar on APIs and securing those, I think, last month. As those things become more prevalent, how do you see testing adapting to that? Obviously, things like rolling out new services, and hopefully we'll keep up with that as well. But do you see testing being able to adapt to those changes going forward?
I would say yes. The hard part about that is, whenever it comes to AI and all these new tools and everything that are being out there, it becomes hard to train on those as well, and finding people who are willing to train on those. So it can be hard, but as long as people are willing to train and learn, I don't see that being an issue.
Great. So I'm going to wrap us up with this question, and then I'm going to see if any questions came in from the crowd here. If you could make one network security, either testing or some sort of threat related, any sort of recommendation network security wise to the audience for 2026, what comes to the top of mind there?
Something that I really like to do: go out to conferences, go talk to security folks that are out there, see what's going on around your organizations, or even say you're in banking, go to a different conference somewhere else that's cybersecurity related. Get your education out there. Learn more. Essentially, that would be my number one recommendation for this year, as well as for myself. Education is huge on my calendar for the next year as well. So that would be it.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's a good one to end on, particularly since we constantly have great webinar content and other things that we'd be happy to share with everybody. So really appreciate that, Hunter. I'm going to put our contact information up here, but I'm also going to check and see if we had any questions come in. I don't know that I saw any. Let's see here, Q&A. No open questions. We must have answered everybody's questions, Hunter. I'm going to stick around for another minute here. But I do want to just say to everybody out there, thank you so much for joining us as always. Really appreciate your taking some time to spend with us, and hopefully the upcoming holiday here is a safe and happy one for everybody. Hunter, can't thank you enough. You're awesome. This was great, even though you got our webinars confused, but I understand. They're okay. That's okay. And Lindsay, you may have jumped off already, but I appreciate you being here as well. For anybody in the audience, if you don't mind taking that survey, if you want a copy of the slide deck or the recording, please feel free to answer that on the survey or reach out via email. I'd be happy to provide that as well. With that said, I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone.